She looked right at me when she said it. He was my starter husband. She laughed, her friends joining in like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all night. My training marriage. Now I know what I really want. The room erupted in laughter, wine glasses clinking, music pulsing in the background. I smiled too. At least, that's what it looked like on the outside. But inside, something quiet and permanent broke. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure to hit subscribe, leave a like, and comment if you've ever been laughed at and decided to rise instead of break. You're going to want to hear this. The party was at one of her co-workers' houses, a two-story mansion with a perfect backyard view, and people who spoke like life was a competition. My wife, Melissa, had spent all week preparing for it. She picked her outfit days in advance, rehearsed small talk, and made sure we brought the right wine. She thrived on appearances, the kind of woman who never went anywhere without a plan to impress. I was used to it by then. I worked in logistics, not glamorous, but solid. I managed supply chains for a regional company, made sure things ran on time, saved the business from falling apart more times than I could count. I didn't brag about it, though. I never felt the need to. To me, success wasn't about applause. It was about consistency, stability, the kind of things that never make a good story at a dinner party. Melissa used to say she loved that about me, my calmness, my reliability. But over the years, that turned into something else. You're too comfortable, she'd say. Too predictable. She wanted excitement, something shinier, louder. I could feel her slipping away, but I still believed we were fine. Until that night, the house was packed. Music, laughter, expensive perfume. Everything felt polished and artificial. Melissa looked stunning in her emerald dress, the kind that made everyone turn their heads when she walked in. I stayed close but quiet, letting her shine. She moved through the crowd like she belonged there, talking to her friends about promotions, vacations, and everything that sparkled. That I was talking to one of the husbands, some finance guy bragging about his Tesla, when I heard her voice behind me. "Oh, come on. You remember Tom, right?" she said, her tone light and teasing. "He was my starter husband." The group laughed. "You know, the one you marry before you figure out what you actually want." I turned slowly. She looked at me, eyes bright, smile wide, like it was just a joke. Everyone around her laughed. I smiled too, not because I found it funny, but because I refused to give them what they wanted. I nodded politely, raised my glass, and said, "Glad I could help you practice." They laughed even harder. Melissa winked, thinking she'd gotten away with it, but something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. That kind of laughter only happens when respect is gone. And once it's gone, there's nothing left to build on. I stayed for another 10 minutes, just long enough not to make a scene. I thanked the host, set my drink down, and walked out. Melissa didn't even notice at first. She was too busy entertaining her audience. When I got home, I packed a small bag. No shouting, no confrontation. Just quiet, deliberate movement. I took one last look around the house, the place where we used to dream, where her laughter once felt warm, and walked out. I left a note on the counter. It said, "You can keep the spotlight. I'll find peace somewhere else." The next morning, I didn't go back. No calls, no texts, just silence. I rented a small apartment downtown and started showing up early to work. I didn't explain anything to anyone. People noticed, sure, but I wasn't interested in sympathy. I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. Every day that passed, I felt lighter. No more pretending, no more trying to live up to someone else's version of success. I started focusing on myself, learning, growing, pushing forward. Melissa probably thought I'd come crawling back. She always believed I couldn't live without her. But what she didn't realize was that she'd set something in motion, something irreversible. That night, when she laughed and everyone joined her, they didn't see a joke. They saw a man quietly deciding that his worth would never again depend on someone else's approval. And I made sure of that. The first few months after leaving felt like stepping into a different life. The silence was strange at first, almost too quiet, but it was honest. No more pretending to be fine while someone mocked what I was. I went to work early, stayed late, and when I came home, I cooked simple meals in my small apartment and watched the city lights from my window. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own story. I didn't look for Melissa. I knew she'd reach out eventually, but I had nothing left to say. What was there to explain? The night she laughed, something ended. Not just our marriage, but the illusion that love could survive without respect. I started focusing on my career more seriously. I'd always been the dependable one at work, the guy who solved problems without asking for credit. That changed. I began taking risks, offering ideas, pushing projects that others were too cautious to touch. I learned how to speak up in meetings, how to stand tall when others doubted me. My boss noticed. Within 6 months, I was leading a team. Within a year, I was offered a position in a larger company, a national logistics firm expanding into new territories. It meant longer hours, higher stakes, and a salary that made my old life look small. I took it without hesitation. Meanwhile, word got around about my separation. People whispered, speculated, tried to read between the lines. Some looked at me with pity, others with quiet admiration. I didn't correct any of them. I let my work speak for itself. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about building a life she couldn't laugh at anymore. About a year after I left, I ran into an old friend who'd been at that infamous party. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, like he didn't know what to say. After a few awkward seconds, he finally said, "Man, that night, that was rough. She went too far." I shrugged. "It's fine. She just helped me make a decision." He nodded slowly. "Well, I heard she's not doing great. You know, after you left, she started seeing someone from her office. Didn't last. I think she thought it'd make you jealous." I smiled faintly. "I hope she finds what she's looking for." And I meant it. There was no anger left. I'd moved past that stage. Life was too short to stay bitter. My new job was demanding, but I thrived under pressure. I traveled often, met people who valued results over appearances, and found myself in rooms I never imagined I'd be in. Somewhere along the way, I started to enjoy the solitude. I rediscovered things I'd given up: reading, running, even cooking for pleasure. It was strange how much of myself I'd sacrificed trying to make someone else happy. Now, every step I took felt like reclaiming a piece of who I used to be. One night, after a long business trip, I got home and found a message waiting in my inbox. It was from Melissa. The subject line just said, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a while before opening it. The message was short. "I know I hurt you. I see that now. You didn't deserve what I said, and I was cruel. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. You were a good man. Better than I realized." I read it twice, then closed my laptop. There was a time when a message like that would have shaken me, made me wonder if there was still something to salvage. But not anymore. I didn't reply. There was nothing to gain from reopening a door that was better left closed. I'd forgiven her silently, not for her sake, but for mine. The following week, I was invited to a charity event hosted by one of our corporate partners. It was formal, black tie, big names, the kind of event where everyone networked over champagne. I almost didn't go, but something told me to show up. When I arrived, the ballroom was filled with laughter, polished floors, and the kind of confidence money buys. I was used to these rooms by then, but I still preferred to stay near the edge, observing. Then I met her, Claire. She wasn't loud or flashy like most people there. She was calm, with dark hair tied neatly back and a quiet intelligence in her eyes. We started talking about the charity's work, then about travel, books, life. It was effortless, natural. For the first time in years, I felt seen without being judged. As the evening went on, we found ourselves standing near the balcony, watching the city lights below. She smiled and said, "You seem like someone who's been through a lot, but still believes in good things." I laughed softly. Maybe because I learned the hard way that the wrong people can make you forget who you are. And the right ones remind you, she said. That sentence stayed with me long after that night. We exchanged numbers, and from there, everything unfolded quietly, without drama. Claire was different. She didn't need to be impressed. She appreciated simplicity, honesty. And in that, I found peace again. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything. The months that followed felt like waking up after years of sleep. Claire and I saw each other often, at first casually, then more intentionally. She had a way of listening that made silence comfortable, not awkward. She wasn't trying to fix me or shape me into something else. She just let me be. That was new for me, being accepted without judgment. We spent weekends exploring small towns, visiting art galleries, trying out local diners instead of fancy restaurants. She laughed easily, but not at people, always with them. I didn't realize how much I'd missed that kind of warmth. Slowly, I started to feel something I hadn't in a long time. peace mixed with purpose. My work continued to grow too. The projects I led brought in big results, and within another year, I was promoted again, this time to a regional director position. It came with more responsibility, a larger team, and a salary that would have stunned my past self. The board appreciated my ability to lead calmly through chaos. They called me steady, strategic, reliable. The same words that once made me feel small in my marriage now defined my strength. Claire celebrated every milestone quietly, never making it about herself. She'd cook dinner, pour a glass of wine, and say things like, "I knew you could do this." There was no envy, no competition, just support. I didn't need validation anymore, but her belief in me made everything feel lighter. About 2 years after that night at the party, my company sponsored another major charity gala, this time in New York. I'd been asked to speak on behalf of our firm about leadership and growth. Claire came with me, wearing a deep navy dress that shimmered under the lights. She looked elegant, timeless, the kind of beauty that didn't demand attention but commanded it naturally. As we entered the ballroom, I noticed the flash of cameras, the hum of conversation, the polished air of success everywhere around us. It was strange, familiar, but distant. I'd spent years trying to belong in rooms like this when I was with Melissa. Now I didn't need to. I was invited here because of who I'd become, not who I was with. I gave my speech. Nothing grand, just honest words about perseverance, humility, and the power of staying grounded. People applauded, some even stood. I smiled, shaking hands, thanking them, but my eyes searched for Claire. She was there, watching me with quiet pride. That meant more than any applause ever could. Later that evening, as we posed for a photo for a business magazine covering the event, the photographer said, "Perfect. One more shot of the CEO and his wife." I didn't correct him. I just smiled. It wasn't official yet, but the words didn't feel wrong. A week later, the magazine came out with a full-page feature. My name, my company, my story, and a photo of Claire beside me, her hand gently on my arm. The title read, "From Humble Beginnings to Visionary Leadership, CEO and His Wife." I didn't think much of it until my phone buzzed late one evening. It was a message from a number I hadn't seen in years. "You've changed so much. You look different. Melissa." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "You too," I wrote back. "Only I changed for the better." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence said everything. I sat there thinking about the path that led me here, from the humiliation of that night to the quiet strength I found afterward. I wasn't the same man who'd smiled through her laughter. I was someone who learned that sometimes losing what you thought was everything is the only way to find yourself. A few months later, I asked Claire to marry me. It wasn't a grand gesture or a staged event. We were walking through the park on a crisp Sunday morning when I stopped by the lake, pulled the ring from my pocket, and said, "You make life simple in the best way. Stay with me always." She smiled through tears and said yes. No speeches, no audience, just honesty. That was all we ever needed. When we married, it was a small ceremony, just family and a few friends. No one there cared about titles or appearances. It was love stripped down to what mattered. After the vows, as we danced slowly under soft lights, Claire whispered, "You don't look like a man who's ever been broken." I smiled and said, "That's because sometimes breaking is just how we rebuild stronger." I didn't know if Melissa ever saw the photos of the wedding, but I suspected she did. People always find what they're meant to see. And maybe that was the point. She had her version of happiness once, but she traded it for applause. I had mine now, quiet and real. Every morning I woke up beside Claire, I felt grateful. Not for revenge, not for validation, but for peace. The kind that comes when you stop chasing someone else's idea of success and start living your own. Life had finally come full circle, and I didn't need anyone to clap for it. The years that followed passed with a steady rhythm, like a song that finally found its right tempo. Claire and I built a life grounded in calm confidence, the kind that didn't need to prove anything to anyone. We moved into a quiet house near the lake, where mornings smelled of coffee and sunlight. I'd sit by the window before work, reading the paper while Claire hummed in the kitchen. There was peace in the simplicity, the kind I used to think I'd never have again. My company grew faster than expected. We expanded into 3 new regions, and I was officially promoted to CEO. The title didn't feel like a trophy. It felt like responsibility earned through years of showing up, staying steady, never losing focus. I hired people who'd been overlooked, the quiet workers who reminded me of the man I used to be. I knew what it felt like to be underestimated, and I made sure no one under my watch ever felt that again. The magazine features became more frequent: interviews, profiles, photos of Claire and me at charity events. She handled all of it with her usual grace, never making it about attention. She always said, "It's not about the picture, it's about the story behind it." And she was right. The story wasn't about success, it was about transformation. About what happens when you stop letting other people define your worth. One evening, after a long day, we hosted a dinner for partners and clients at a downtown hotel. It was elegant but warm, filled with laughter and soft music. At some point during the evening, a woman approached me near the bar. It took me a second to recognize her. Melissa. Her hair was darker, her smile smaller, her confidence dimmed. She wore a formal dress, beautiful but slightly out of place, like she was trying to fit into a room that no longer belonged to her. "Tom," she said softly, almost unsure. "It's been a long time." I nodded. "It has." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of the room faded around us. She looked down at her drink, then back at me. "I saw the article," she said quietly. "You've done well. You look happy." "I am," I said simply. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I was young, stupid," she continued. "I thought I was funny that night. I didn't realize how cruel I sounded. You didn't deserve that." "You're right," I said. "I didn't." There was no anger in my voice, no need to hurt her. I'd already left that behind. She hesitated, then asked, "Is that your wife?" glancing toward Claire, who was talking with a group across the room. "Yes," I said. "Her name's Claire." Melissa nodded slowly. "She seems kind." "She is," I said. "She's everything I never knew I needed." Melissa's eyes glistened, and she whispered, "I'm glad you found someone who saw you for who you really are." I looked at her, this woman who once defined so much of my pain, and I realized she wasn't my enemy. She was just a chapter, the one that taught me how to close a book and start again. "We both learned something," I said quietly. "You about what you wanted, and me about what I wouldn't accept anymore." She gave a small, tired laugh. "You always had the last word." "Not the last," I said. "Just the right one." She smiled faintly, then turned to leave. As she walked away, I felt no triumph, no bitterness, only closure. When I returned to the table, Claire looked up with her familiar warm smile. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Perfect," I said, and meant it. That night, when we got home, I sat outside for a while, the lake calm and silver under the moonlight. Claire joined me, wrapping a blanket around us both. "You're quiet," she said. "Just thinking," I replied. "About the past?" "A little," I said. "It's strange how the things that once broke you become the foundation for everything you build later." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "That's because you didn't let it define you. You let it refine you." I smiled at her words. They were simple but true. The next morning, as I drove to work, I passed by a park where families were setting up for a weekend fair. I saw couples laughing, kids running, people just living. I thought about how different my life could have been if I'd stayed stuck in that version of myself that needed to be accepted, that needed to prove my worth through someone else's opinion. Instead, I chose silence, growth, and the slow climb back to myself. That choice had changed everything. Months later, another magazine requested a feature on leadership and personal growth. During the interview, the journalist asked, "What would you say to the person you were 10 years ago?" I thought about it for a moment, then said, "Don't be afraid to be underestimated. Let them laugh. Let them doubt. The quiet ones always end up surprising everyone." The article ended with that quote, and it spread fast, not because it was clever, but because it was true. When the story came out, I received dozens of messages from people who'd been through their own versions of being dismissed, humiliated, or undervalued. They thanked me for sharing, for reminding them that self-worth isn't earned through applause. It's built in silence. It's proven in time. One evening, as Claire and I were preparing dinner, I told her about the messages. She smiled and said, "You didn't just rebuild yourself, Tom. You gave other people permission to do the same." I looked at her, really looked, and realized that everything I'd ever lost had led me to this, to peace, to purpose, to love without pretense. So when people ask me if I ever think about my first marriage, I tell them, yes, because it taught me what kind of man I refused to stay. And that's the truth. If you've ever been dismissed, laughed at, or made to feel small, remember this. The greatest revenge is not anger, but evolution. So hit subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts below. Because sometimes the quietest comeback is the one that changes everything.